On What Are You Reading, we have interesting conversations with knowledgeable guests about the fascinating characters, places, and information that you find in books. And there's a lot to talk about because each year over 275,000 books are published in the United States. In the area of fiction, there's a new book of fiction being published every 30 minutes. Now, recently I had an opportunity to talk with some writers and poets from the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance. I found them to be a fascinating, intriguing, insightful, and very entertaining group. Some of those interviews follow next on What Are You Reading? Welcome to What Are You Reading? We are the celebrity talk show where the books are the celebrities, and the celebrities this time are going to be books about science fiction, because with us is Stephen Miller and Sharon Lee, writers from Maine who write about science fiction. Welcome. You're the first time we've had science fiction writers on the show, so I want to find out all about what you folks do. I'll start with Sharon. Sharon, how did you get interested in science fiction?
How did I get interested in science fiction? I got interested in science fiction because the very first book that I wrote was called How the Rhinoceros Got Its Skin, which you would think was written by Rudyard Kipling. But I fell in love with it when I was a small child and decided that I wanted to be a writer, and this was a great story. So I got one of those old marble-back books and a big, thick pencil, and I copied it out. And I put my name on it, and my father said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm writing a book." And he said, "Rudyard Kipling has already written this book." And I said, "No, but I'm going to take this book and put it under my bed so no one will know that Rudyard had written it. And I'm going to, basically foist this on an unsuspecting public as my own work." And he recommended that I go to school and study hard. But just writing is what I became interested in. Science fiction was much later.
Came along later.
Later, after I'd read a whole bunch of stuff.
Did you read science fiction as a kid growing up?
I read fairy tales and biographies and autobiographies and horse stories and all the rest of it. Probably I hit science fiction around high school and went, this stuff is great.
Yeah, I can see where it resonates with teenagers. And Steve, what about yourself? Was it being writing first, or did it come together at the same time?
I think I had the assumption that I would be a writer in part because my grandmother was a writer, a poet. She was a world-class poet who got a gold medal for writing for her poetry from the World Congress of Poets. And there was always the assumption that she gave me books every year. So for all the presents, for Christmas, birthdays, you name it, just she went past the bookstore and saw a book that she thought I'd like. And somehow I was always going to be a writer. That was something that I was going to do. I initially was a poet and did some work with poetry. But in terms of overall writing, I hit high school, and I was writing. I was writing every week. I would sometimes stint my homework because I was writing a story or working on a poem. And when I got to college, I ended up at the school newspaper. So I went off, had a diversion into newspaper writing and newspaper work for a while. But always the fiction was in the background. But I started off reading science fiction pretty much. A friend of my mother's had a basement full of Tom Swift books, the original Tom Swift books. And I think they had all of those plus some Rick Brandt. And I just read. I read voraciously. I'd read 2 or 3 of those a day at one point. So that's what I did. And it was always, I read the boys' books. I read Fury and those things too, but along the line, I pretty much just inhaled science fiction.
Right. Now, and you two collaborate, and tell us about the series that you do.
The series that we do is called the Liaden Universe series, and there are currently 14 books in it. 14. When did you start this? When
was the first one created?
We started in 1984.
Okay.
That's not when it was first published, but that's when Sharon came to me and said, "I think I have a novel here." And she had one line at the top of a sheet of paper.
And the line was, do you remember?
Oh, yes.
Of course you remember,
of
yes.
Course, it's the first line in Agent of Change, which is, "The man who was not Terence O'Grady had come quietly." Now, you have to
Okay.
understand that this was after a day of typing and throwing pieces of paper. It was at a typewriter.
Well, there's a
So-
quote, the wastebasket is the writer's best friend. So, that was the sentence that began the 14-book series, and probably more books to come?
Oh, yes. We
Yeah.
have a
Okay.
contract for 3 more right now.
Okay. Now, Steve, you said something interesting. You said that's not when it was published, but that's when it was first
Oh, right.
came out. So, because I think the backstory on this, of how this came about and how you had done 3 of the books, and then there was some question about whether there would be more to come, but really it was the popular appeal.
What happened initially is that Sharon came up with the idea, pardon me, and she came up with this, and we sat down that night and mapped out a potential 7 books out of this one sentence. And so
7 books from one sentence.
we
Okay.
It's
knew
a
that-
really good sentence.
Okay.
Yes, we knew we had a series. We knew that that's what we wanted to do, and that's how we approached it. And the first one got written, and we knew enough writers, we knew enough people who, I had a good background with meeting science fiction writers. I'd been to conventions, I'd been to the Clarion Workshop, which is the major science fiction writing workshop. So I knew people, and I knew that if you just waited for your book, had it done, and just waited for somebody to publish it, you might never get another chance. So we immediately, we immediately started writing another one. And
In the meantime, we sent Agent of Change out, and we decided the best way to go about this was to start in Writer's Market with A and just continue
Work your
through.
way down. And how far did you have to go in the alphabet?
We had to go to Del Rey.
Okay.
We sent it to Ace, and we knew the editor there from Steve's contacts at conventions, and she held on to it for 9 months. I finally called her, and she said, geez, I kept hoping I'd run into you guys at a convention so I could explain to you why I'm not taking this book. It's like John Le Carre in space. And I'm thinking, you say this like it's a bad thing. So she sent it back. We then sent it to Dahl, we sent it to Dahl on Monday, and it came back to us on Thursday. So
A little bit quicker turnaround
a
on
little
that
bit
one.
quicker turnaround
Yeah.
on that one. Apparently they were full. And then we sent it to Del Rey. And we waited, and we started writing the second book, Conflict of Honors. And one day I was home writing, and the phone rang, and I let the answering machine take it because I just knew it was my mother-in-law wanting me to go shopping for her or something, and I needed to write. And I hear this voice go, yeah, my name's Steve Hickman, and I'm the artist that Del Rey has hired to do the cover for your novel, Agent of Change. And I went, what?
because they hadn't told us that they had bought the novel yet,
We didn't have a contract.
but they were already looking forward and doing the art. And so what happened is that by the time Agent of Change was published, because these things don't happen instantly, by the time Agent of Change was actually published, they bought it, they had the art. It took about 10 months or 11 months from the time they bought it for it actually to come out. We had finished the second book and started on the third book.
So you had written it in 1984. When was it published?
We started,
1988.
yeah, in 1988.
February of
4 years. 4 years. Okay. Life in the 80s. Of course, now books are much higher turnaround.
No,
And,
no.
well, in self-publishing or
Oh.
in some, yeah,
Well,
with other
that's
things.
In self-publishing, if you're going to traditional publishing, the time, we're talking to new writers now who are waiting 4 or 5 years to get their books after they've been accepted, to just have them scheduled.
Mhm.
So there were a lot of people writing books.
Yes, there are. So the books. Then after the third book, what happened?
We moved to Maine.
We lived in the suburbs of Baltimore, and for a while when we were writing the first 3 books, we'd gotten a job with a self-storage facility, and that was really handy, called
Public storage?
public storage, and that meant that one of us could stay in the house and write while the other one covered the storage facility, and we did that for some time. We moved to Maine, and as soon as we moved to Maine, we had sold the third book, turned it in, and the editor sent us a note saying, we haven't seen the numbers yet on these, but I'd like you to do a book that's not like the Liaden universe for us, something else entirely, because I'm not sure about the 4th book that you've outlined, so why don't we do something else? And so we wrote another book entirely, and that took about 9 months, sent it to her, at which point
she called us up on the phone and she said, and it's always a bad thing when an editor starts out being complimentary to you. She said, you know, writers, I mean, I just admire you so much. You go to work every day, you work your day job, you come home, you write, such commitment. It's so hard to
So
do.
you know there's something coming.
And I'm like, and I'm waiting. She's making it soft for me. And she said, but I'm not taking this book because it's not even like a Liaden book. But you ask us for something different.
I have it here in writing. You wanted something that was
Right,
completely not
right.
like the Liaden books. And so she turned us down, and there was a period of time, about 7 years or so, where we couldn't sell anything, in part because the other publishers were concerned that we had these books hanging over our head. They were, that there was, they didn't sell. Obviously, they thought they didn't sell, which turned out not to be the case.
It did turn out not to be the case. The internet arrived in Maine during this 7-year hiatus, and we never stopped. We never stopped writing. We kept on writing. We wrote 5 books during.
And they
7
appeared
years.
on the internet.
Not at that point,
No,
no.
not
The
at that
internet
point.
was too young for that.
The internet was too young. It was just out of Usenet and the FidoNet stuff. But we started to get letters, email from people saying, are you the Sharon Lee or are you the Steve Miller? And you're like, okay, what did we do now? Well, I read your book, Agent of Change, Conflict of Honor, Carpe Diem. And where's the third one? Where's the fourth one? And they kept saying, because in Carpe Diem, Plan B is invoked by the characters. Something
Right.
terrible has happened, so they invoke Plan B.
Right.
When's Plan B coming out? So the fans titled the 4th book, basically.
And we had been asked, it was a very strange thing, we've been asked suddenly without warning to be guests of honor at a convention on the West Coast. Our first guest
So
of
all
honor.
of a sudden you discovered that, yes, you did have a following, and that, yes, there were people out there reading this.
Well, we had seen the Del Rey editors had a news group, a list that was on the internet around that time, and people were writing to them saying, when whatever happened to the Liaden books, we're still interested. And one of the editors famously said, we will not be doing any more Liaden books based on a couple hundred people on the internet.
Right.
And which turned into many thousands of people on the internet.
And we ended up a very Maine kind of a story. We got a phone call from a gentleman we'd never heard of before, talking about a publishing company we had heard of very, very minutely, saying, hi, my name is Steve Pagel, and I've been reading, I've read your books, and I know they're out of print. I'd like to know they're what was he using?
If they're available.
They're charming.
They're charming.
He said, I think they're charming, and I would like to buy them and reissue them if they're available. And
The rights had reverted to us, so we could resell the books.
and he called us, and this was, let us, for argument's sake, say this was a Friday evening. And he had money to buy books with, and he was going down a list of people that he wanted to buy books. And Sharon said to him, well, there's another one after the 3 you have that's already written. And he says, oh, what's it? And she said, that's Plan B. It comes immediately. Well, I'll take it.
And I said, do you realize, well, okay, this never happens. There are 7 altogether, and all
in
but
this-
1 is written. And he went, I'll take them too. And that does never happen. I mean,
And
sight unseen.
he said, but you haven't seen my contract. Here's what I'll offer you. And he made a fairly reasonable offer for that number of books over time, especially since some of them were reprints. And he said, but I'm not expecting you to answer me tonight. I understand. He said, I'll call, you call me Monday or Tuesday. Well, okay. So that was, let us say it was a Friday night. And Saturday
January
morning
even.
in January. And it began snowing, and then it turned to rain, and then we had the big ice storm.
So, okay.
And
During the big ice storm.
during the big ice storm, and almost instantly we lost power.
We lost power, we had no phone. That was 7 days. We had no power and no phone. When the phone came back on, we did not call Steve's mom first. We called the guy in Georgia, the publisher in Georgia, and he said, geez, I was getting worried about you guys. I said, well, we had this huge ice storm with no power. And he went, what ice storm?
Right.
He
Right.
had no clue. He said, I was about ready to move on to the next people since I hadn't heard back from you. And so
Luckily, you got phone service.
was a close call.
Luckily, you got phone service, and Liaden Universe was really up and running at that point.
it was again, yes,
Okay.
indeed.
Well, we'll come back in just a little bit, talk some more about it. But first, you are watching What Are You Reading? Welcome back to What Are You Reading? We are the celebrity talk show where the books are the celebrities, and with us are Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. Thanks for being on. We're talking about all the machinations that went through getting your book series up and running, and it happened. And where are you now? You said you've done 14 books. How many people read the book? How large is your fan base? Because I know we were talking earlier about you go to lots of science fiction conventions. You're very much revered in the science fiction community. Tell us a little bit about that.
In the science fiction community, we have a internet mailing list called the Liaden Universe Info Dump, and Info Dump is something.
And again, we're talking about Liaden Universe, right, which is your I can't call it a trilogy. I don't know what you would call 14 books. I don't know what that would be.
It's a universe.
It's just a series. Okay, 14 books and expanding all the time.
So the Liaden Universe Info Dump, which is a newsletter on the internet, goes out to about 2,200 people.
Okay.
And those are, I hate to put it that way, but those are our hardcore.
I was going to use hardcore fans. Okay.
And it's difficult to try to measure how many fans we have, in part because if I tell people we're known around the world, it's true. Some of our books have been published in German, Russian, Polish.
This is all Liaden.
Yeah.
These are the Liaden
okay.
books, yes. And the result is that we were in Montreal for the World Science Fiction Convention 2 years ago, that would have been. And in Montreal, there was a man who had flown from Israel to Montreal in order to meet us, and someone else who came in from Sweden because he found out we were going to be there.
And someone who came in from London.
So what is the draw of the book? Tell me a little bit about the character. When people talk to you, what fascinates them? What draws them to the series?
The single most common thing that people say to us is, I love your characters.
Okay.
And we write, the Liaden universe is a space opera universe, which means it's larger than life characters. There's adventure, there's romance, there's over-the-top adventure. And we're writing about a particular family.
Now, give me an example of over-the-top adventure. Now, we're used to watching...
Over-the-top adventure. You have, in one of our books, we have a scene where 3 pilots storm an airfield. That is, they actually sort of sneak into an airfield where there are prepared engine jets and rockets for the enemy. And the one of them is so short that when he goes into the cockpit, he's got to put things on his feet to give him extension and sit like this to fly the plane, because it's not built for him. It's built for another race of people. And they steal the plane. He's shot up in as part of it, and then they fly the planes away, attacking the enemy on the way out. And the one man has been injured, and he starts to hallucinate. So he sees a spaceship taking off, and he's in a jet, and he starts chasing the rocket that's taking off in his jet. Okay, so that's kind of over the top.
Okay.
It's exciting action-adventure stuff that people read, and then they hit the end. And again, the second most common thing is I got to the last page and I shook the book to make sure there wasn't any more story.
Yeah, you're leaving them wanting more.
Yep.
Exactly. So there you have people that are fascinated with the story now, and you go to conventions and see other like-minded science fiction enthusiasts. Tell us a little bit about life at a convention, at a science fiction convention.
Life at a science fiction convention, from a pro's point of view, a writer's point of view, or an artist's point of view, is you go to the convention to meet your fans and to actually get FaceTime with them and talk to them, to be on panels with other professionals, to talk about either things that are burning in the field, or to discuss how to do characterization, how to do world building. We also do writing workshops from time to time, where we'll take manuscripts from hopeful writers and help them figure out what's wrong and what's working, and why both of those are happening.
And the conventions are community things to us. I've been going to conventions since 1974, and we know a lot of the people who do the regular conventions. It's very possible for me to walk into a room at a party and continue a conversation I last had with somebody on the other coast. And we have, along the way, part of the jobs that fall to a visiting writer when we're guests of honor is that we may have to help judge art shows. We have to help judge costume contests and masquerades. And we sometimes have to go off, and I say have to, but we enjoy doing it, go to libraries or bookstores and do signings and do speaking there. It's a very intense kind of a thing because a lot of people who've come have come particularly to meet us, and this is their first time, and it may be their only time in their life that they expect to meet us, and they will come with a lot of intent, a lot of build-up behind it, even if it's only to say, I love your books.
It gets a little frightening sometimes that one of the guest of honor gigs that we do, because you're supposed to give a talk or a presentation as a guest of honor at a convention, and because the first thing that people say to us is, we love your characters, we had done for several years a presentation where we said to the people, to the audience, okay, you tell us, you decide what question you want to ask what character. You tell us what character, and you ask the question, and one of us will answer in character. And we stopped.
I bet they love that idea.
Most of them did, but we had one lady who had never been to a convention before, and she didn't understand the rules. And there is a very scary ant in the Liaden universe novels named Aunt Karine Yosfelium, and she is very correct. And she is more correct than anyone. She's more correct than Miss Manners. And this particular lady had, a very timid lady, unfortunately, had a question for Karine Yosfelium. And she stood up and she said, I want to ask Karine Yosfelium why she did this. And I stood up and said, who asks? And she turned white. I'd never actually seen anyone turn white before. So some people forget the game.
We also, we go, and one of the things that we do is we have we call a Liaden Universe or a Friends of Liad breakfast, most conventions that we go to, where our fans can come in and we all find a place where we can have breakfast together and just catch up with each other. And then the Friends of Liad often, especially for things like a World Science Fiction Convention, they'll rent a suite and then have a party every evening or several evenings where our fans can come and be around other fans, and generally we get to go there a couple hours a night because it's such a frenetic atmosphere outside that we go and we can have it's like our port in the storm for them.
Right. Now, how many more will you write? Will you just, this will be, it's infinite?
There are a lot of characters and there's a lot of real estate, and that's why it's the Liaden universe. It's a big place, and the family has associates and other people, all of whom have stories. So it doesn't, the main problem that started in Agent of Change was solved in Idare.
Which was book 7.
That opened a whole new set of problems which we're now dealing with.
Right.
And we're bringing in new generation characters.
Right. Now, I want to step away from that for just a minute, because I know that you write some other things as well. Have you found that all of your time goes to the Liaden universe now, or do you find that, because you've written a couple of Maine mystery books, and Steve, have you written other things as well? Or?
I do some newspaper stuff, and I'm also a publisher on the side.
Okay. So you do have to come back to this universe once in a while. Have you written other things since the takeoff of your book series?
Well, the Carousel Tides I have written, which is a Maine-based fantasy. It's based in a only slightly alternate Old Orchard Beach. It has a haunted carousel and selkies and the ghosts of Abenaki warriors. It was a whole lot of fun to write. And I had been
Sounds fun. Sounds like it's a very rich
it was great
story.
And I had been saying I was going to write a story about Old Orchard Beach for, 5 years?
It
Every
took
time I
about
went to
that
Old
long.
Orchard Beach, I'm going to write a story about this place. I love this place so much. And finally I realized that if I didn't write it, it wasn't going to write itself. So I took a year off and wrote Carousel Tides.
And part of the thing about writing is that what the reader doesn't know is that there's a lot of process that happens behind the scenes, so that while Sharon was, quote, taking a year off, part of what I was doing was proofreading books that had already been sold and were in the chain, so the books would come back and they'd have to be proofed, they'd have to be gone over, they'd have to be, in some cases, slightly rewritten or tinked with along the line. And so the process is not straightforward. You write the book, you turn it in, and
Right.
it's right there. And even the process of doing, you get a proof back, and then you get a final proof, which looks just like a book, and you still should go through that and make sure that there's
All the
not one
pages are
more.
there, yes.
Right.
And because we've had a book come back where the editorial assistant had sent the wrong version to the printer.
So then instead of the corrected version,
Right.
he sent the
Right.
one
So,
before that.
so there's a lot of other things going on at the same time.
Right, exactly. All in the business of being a writer and being in the book business. And so, well, Liaden Universe, you think it will just continue on for however long,
As long as there are stories.
as long as there's, and it sounds like there's plenty of stories to be told about it. So, Steve and Sharon, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you.
And you are watching What Are You Reading?